Hello 99ers and nerds and microcomputer fans. It's time to talk about the best of the last of the Doom games. Games created for the TI-99's Tunnels of Doom RPG engine, mainly in the late 80s. These are the games that kept TI-99 RPG fans fed from 85 on, giving folks new things to do, playing the TI-99's best RPG. In earlier episodes, I've looked at how TOD ended up as the RPG engine that defined the TI-99. And I've talked about how, in the long run, that engine made it possible for fans to create new adventures that expanded its horizons. Last time, I looked at the new TOD games 99ers got in 85 and 86. Most of them either created by John Benke or made possible by his TOD editor. But now we're going to look at the even better Tunnels of Doom games that we got in the years that followed. There are some great games in the mix here. 1987 really is when TOD games came of age. And a big reason they came of age in 87 is that that's when a couple of all-time great TI-99 developers threw their hats into the ring and tried their hand at building Tunnels of Doom adventures. And the results were pretty impressive. They did not disappoint. One of those developers was Donn Granros, the developer you hopefully already know from his Legends RPG series. If you watch this channel, you've probably heard me mention Legends plenty often. And rightfully so. Legends was an amazing contribution to the TI-99. But another great contribution from Granros was his 1987 TOD game, headline Einstein Kidnapped. In this one, a group of terrorist monks have kidnapped Einstein and a radical new atomic device. If you don't stop them, they may control the world with the aid of a group of nasty creatures. Please, help. So, tongue-in-cheek for sure. But if this one's a bunch of nonsense, it's at least a really damn creative bunch of nonsense. Granros was an artist, and it definitely shows in Einstein Kidnapped. The game's packed with all new monsters, items, and tile patterns. For me, this game sets a new standard for TOD adventures, with a lot of work put into making it unique, and based on a concept that is, yes, stupid, but in the best kind of way. It was a heck of a year for Granros, given he also released Legends in 87, and, well, happily, Einstein Kidnapped has a few Easter eggs for us Legends fans. Like the fighter character design here, which is the same in both games. Einstein Kidnapped is an entertaining premise, supported by a lot of good content. It definitely ranks up there with the best in TOD games. So, if that sounds like me telling you to put this one on your Tunnels to-do list, it definitely is. But 1987 was a busy year all around for TOD. TOD Editor 3.0 is now on offer, and new adventures were adding up. John Benke released Quest 5 in his series, Doctor Who. Leveraging that opportunity abandoned and ignored computer platforms have, I suppose, to infringe on copyright however we like, mostly without getting noticed. Very handy. Anyway, in Doctor Who, you have become the Doctor, an old Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, who travels through time in his TARDIS time machine. Ooh, the TARDIS is a time machine? You must find the 8 keys to time, but watch for those who will stop you. And this one is pretty much what you'd expect. Take a Tunnels of Doom adventure, throw in some Daleks and Cybermen and Silurians, and away you go. Meanwhile, play as the Doctor, a companion, or K9. As a Doctor Who hack of Benke's earlier work, it's okay, I guess, but compared with a game like Einstein Kidnapped, where the game is rebuilt from top to bottom, Doctor Who's revamp is a little lightweight at this point. So, if you're a Doctor Who fanatic, this one might be worth it, but for folks who are looking for Doom games for their own sake, it's probably skippable. Benke released one more adventure in 1987, Quest 6 in his series, The Dragon Orbs. And this one is another fantasy adventure along the lines of The Dark Tower and the Volcano Fortress. In this one, you have discovered the lost Dungeon of Dragons. It is in this dungeon that the 8 orbs of dragonkind are supposedly hidden, You must recover the orbs and return them to your king to complete your quest. This one, in keeping with the Dungeon of Dragons reference, does draw heavily on D&D specifically for its content. You might even run into Demogorgon down there. So that might be something that draws some folks into it. But that aside, at this point, you know what you're getting from a John Behnke adventure, which is pretty conventional TOD. But hey, if you want a D&D spin on TOD, you've got it here. For me, I'd definitely rather pick a more unique TOD game at this point most of the time. So, I'd give this one a pass. As far as more unique TOD adventures go, we've got one of those for our next game, since 87 saw a couple new faces enter the TOD design fray with really interesting adventures of their own. And one of those was Ken Gilliland, with his new addition to the TOD library being none other than Daring Adventures in Kmart. There, your quest is to find the Blue Light Special and 3 red tag sales before Kmart closes. But beware, greedy housewives and overworked night managers lurk around every aisle. And this one is hilarious for sure. Game assets are completely restyled to fit the theme, so you're fighting mall zombies, yuppies, hippies, drunks, and runaway shopping carts. And if you're lucky, you might even run into Emperor Ken himself. It's another piss take on the format that puts enough work into the joke that it feels like it actually pays off. So, if you've got a sense of humor and you like TOD, this one is very worth a look. Commercially, the game was sold in Asgard's Doom Games 1 package, along with the last 2 Behnke games I'd mentioned, the Dragon Orbs and Doctor Who. And well, for folks who like high fantasy served straight up, maybe Behnke's games are a good fit. But for the rest of us ridiculous bastards, I'd say Kmart has a whole lot more to offer. Not every new TOD developer was trying to turn a dungeon into a shopping mall, though. And Bill Vrona's 1987 Quest for the Magic Maker Diamond is a lot more conventional as far as the setting goes, while still being really creative with its content. You explore the depths of an old dungeon in your quest to find the Magic Maker Diamond. You must locate and capture it before it is destroyed by the evil monsters. So this one kinda reminds me of Walt Dollard's Quest for the King, where the concept is nothing much at all, but the game customization is really, really impressive once you actually play the game, with its monsters and items almost completely reinvented. So QMMD really is one of the top fantasy-flavored adventures for Tunnels of Doom. If you're up for a classic dungeon crawl, it's gonna do that better than almost anything else. Anyway, with all these adventures added to the library, 87 was one hell of a year for Tunnels of Doom. But 88 had a few contributions of its own to make. That year, Michael J. Bourse took his best shot at TOD design with his adventure, Computer Quest. This'll probably remind folks of Behnke's Computer Nightmare on the surface of it, but this one is just a lot more complete as a game, I'd say. The story goes that the world has run out of TI computer systems. You must enter a high-tech underground storage facility and retrieve a prototype TI console and PE box so more can be made. So it's a fun and relatable premise for 99ers. And nearly all the game's items and monsters are redone to fit the theme. So if you like the idea of a fully TI-99 themed TOD adventure, you've got one here. One game asset I haven't mentioned at all so far is TOD sound, but I think it is very worth mentioning here specifically. In TOD, all your enemies have distinctive sounds, but since PSG beeps and boops are all that's on offer, they generally don't sound very much like a rat or a bat or a snake or whatever it is they're trying to be. What it does sound like is a computer or a robot. So, for me, TOD sound works way, way better in an adventure like Computer Quest, full of savage, beepy computers. For once, the sound fits. Computer Quest is definitely a game for anyone who looked at the original Tunnels of Doom adventure and said, not TI-99 enough, needs more TI-99 in it. But even that novelty aside, Computer Quest is just a really solid revamp and worth a play. So 1988's Computer Quest one-upped 1985's Computer Nightmare pretty decisively. But 1988 wasn't done dunking on 85 just yet, because another game from 88 that did that was Gallifreyan Menace from Jim Rice. This is another Doctor Who game, but the work on restyling the game is just a little more thorough this time. In this one, you are sent beneath the Dark Tower to recover a very damaged TARDIS and a number of components which have been scattered throughout the tower. The worst enemies of the Doctor have banded together to stop you. If you can only play one TOD Doctor Who game, I'd say this is a good pick. John Penke's Doctor Who isn't bad at all, but Gallifreyan Menace just goes a little more all-out name-dropping Whovian lore. Still, I figure not everybody needs Doctor Who in their dungeon crawl, so if you do give it a pass, I won't blame you at all. Next up, 1988 also got us another contribution from Donn Granros, who followed up on Einstein Kidnapped with Nerds Persecuted Again! And this one is another delightful pile of high-concept nonsense for folks who like that kind of thing. In this game, nasty frat boys have swiped your best calculators and stashed them somewhere in a grim old haunted fraternity house. You and a few other wimps must enter and recover your calculators before exam time begins. Good luck, nerds! So, another good one from Granros, full of good fun for anyone who wants an adventure that turns TOD dungeons into something else entirely. Granros creates a lot of great monster designs to fit the theme here again, and the item designs are great too. I mean, honestly, are you a nerd? Do you like Tunnels of Doom? Then you should probably play this game, because nerds have been persecuted again. But moving on to 1989 at last, 89 was another great year for TI-99 RPGs since it gave us Legends 2. But there was also some good news in the TOD sphere. There, Ken Gilliland gave us 2 new adventures, sold in Asgard's Doom Games 3. And they're both pretty great. The Shopping Trip is another game that asks just how far outside itself we can take a TOD dungeon crawl. Since yes, indeed, this one starts with a shopping trip. This from the guy who brought us Daring Adventures in Kmart. So par for the course when it comes to Ken Gilliland delivering delightful absurdity to TOD. The story goes, oh no, your senile uncle has wandered into gang-infested South Central Los Angeles on a shopping trip and got lost. You and your friends must save your uncle and his lost bags of groceries before gangs and other nasties get him. The good news here is this is another top-to-bottom redesign, and the art is really good. The only downside here is that since it's an everyday setting, there's not much opportunity for crazy fantasy art or creatures. But yeah, that's kind of the whole joke, and it's a pretty good one. Crawling a dungeon that's claiming to be everyday modern America is a pretty good time. So I'd say Emperor Ken was on his game here again, and this one is definitely one that's worth a play. The other adventure Ken gave us in Doom Games 3 was The Quest for the True King. So if you're keeping score at this point, we've got Quest of the King, Quest for the King, and Quest for the True King. Don't mix them up. Anyway, the joke this one's based on is the same as the one in Legends 2, so I have to wonder if Granros and Gilliland were somehow passing Elvis RPG jokes back and forth in 89? Beats me. This adventure asks, could it be true? The king sighted in a Burger King in Kalamazoo? No, actually, it's Elvis's evil twin brother. You and your party must stop him and his 7 fraudulent singles from reaching the hands of greedy producers. And this game does live up to Gilliland standards. Like the shopping trip and Daring Adventures in Kmart before it, it's got a wacky concept that it builds all its assets around really thoughtfully. So you'll find a dungeon full of talent scouts, groupies, crazed fans, and, well, whatever else belongs in a pop music dungeon. Absolutely ridiculous and absolutely worth a play. After 1989, the golden age of Doom games was mostly done. But that doesn't mean people stopped making them completely. In 1994, we even got another commercial TOD game, when RAM-charged computers released Halls of Lost Moria. The game's a regular fantasy dungeon crawl as far as setting goes, but the work on designing patterns to give it a unique feel is really impressive and thorough. There's more restyling of environment patterns in Moria than in just about any other TOD game out there. So lots of credit to Michael Verprouskas for creating a TOD game that doesn't just create new enemies and items, it gives us what feels like a new dungeon. Of the games I've talked about here, only a couple others, including Walt Dollard's Quest for the King, really went that far in giving TOD's assets a full overhaul from top to bottom. So, Moria is another game that's a must-play for me. And that's how the first decade in community TOD games treated 99ers. There were plenty more games than I've mentioned here, but most of those either didn't see wide distribution at the time, or just aren't very good. Plenty more happened in the TOD sphere since the mid-90s, though. In 2015, Fritz442 on the TI-99 Atari Age forum posted a new TOD game editor for Windows, based on Benke's work. And that editor created a new wave of TOD games designed using its toolset. It's made editing a TOD game easier than ever before. So that program is a great option today if you're interested in building your own TOD adventure. On top of that, Chris Schneider released a collection of 15 Tunnels of Doom games he created back in the day, and those are now available on his Medieval Games TOD Adventure discs. All the adventures I've mentioned here, and a whole lot more I haven't, are in an archive linked in the description of this video. I haven't tried to collect any more recent games there, just the ones from that first decade of TI-99 TOD games from '85 on. But even that's a pretty huge collection. When TOD came out, just about everybody agreed that the game's replayability was phenomenal. Well, here we are almost 40 years later, and we're still making more TOD. That replayability went further than anybody in '83 could have dreamed. Thanks for watching, folks. Interested in designing your own TOD adventure? Or have you ever tried before? And for that matter, do you have any favorites from among those you've played? Tell me about it in the comments. This is Pixel Pedant signing off.